Okay.
Well, I just want to thank you all so much, and I hope you can hear me clearly. I could barely hear what Michael was saying. I think he was introducing me, and then I definitely heard the thunderous applause. But I just I just really want to thank all of you so much for taking a moment out of your time on a Saturday to come together to talk about Medicare for All and to talk about how we move forward collectively to push this agenda. Many of you know that in our revolution, we started the People's Platform, and at the top of that platform is Medicare for All. And although there are some people out there who are pushing against this move, we know, and millions of Americans know, that Medicare for All is absolutely unequivocally the way to go. And as I've been out on the trail, not just this year, even last year, but just talking to people all across this country, it is very clear that people are ready for this. And what we have to do as a movement is to talk to our neighbors, talk to our friends, talk to strangers, but just talk to people about why Medicare for All is the way that we should go in this country, that it is immoral and absolutely immoral with 100 exclamation points, that anybody in America would have to deal with the fact that they don't have high quality medical care, and that we as United States citizens would allow any other country to outdo us in that regard, that we are the only country in the industrialized world that does not have a single payer system. It is absolutely immoral. And this is our moment. And even though we're getting pushed back by certain people who should be on our side, it doesn't matter. We are on the right side of history. And what we have to do is convince our neighbors and our friends and strangers that this is the way to go and that we need them in this. We know even with the Affordable Care Act, there's still almost 30 million people who do not have health insurance, and even more who are underinsured. You know, I met an elder the other day, young elder at that, on the young side of elder, who is 69 years old. And he told me a story. He told me his story about the fact that he needs 3 medications that cost $165 a piece. And he needs these medications every single month, but he's on a fixed income. And recently he had a medical episode because he could not afford to pay for his prescriptions. And so he went without. Nobody should have to do that in this country. Or how about the National Nurses United, which I am so happy are on our side on this. When nurses talk about the needs that we need Medicare for all in this country, we ought to listen, because they are the people by the bedsides of folks in this country during some of the heaviest times of their lives. But there was a nurse, and I'm forgetting her name right now, that was with us when we launched the People's Platform, and she told a story about her patient, a patient that was afraid to file certain paperwork because she knew that her the medical procedure that she needed would not be provided for. And guess what? She was told that she reached her lifetime maximum. Basically, my moral of that story is that how can you still have so much life to live, but you reach your lifetime maximum for healthcare? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so it is going to take people like you, people like me, people who are in Iowa, Ohio, California, North Carolina, South Carolina, North Dakota, South Dakota, all over this country. Is going to take people of good consciousness like us to continue to push this. Many of you may know that I have been channeling Nelson Mandela. I don't know why President Nelson Mandela has been in my heart, my mind, and my soul. But one of my favorite quotes from him is that it always seems impossible. Those of you who were at the People Summit, you heard me give this great speech about it always seems impossible until it is done. And that is what we are facing in 2017, that it seems impossible because people who have voices, louder voices, it seems like they have louder voices than ours, but their voices are not really louder than ours. That the majority of Americans across the political spectrum agree with us that single payer is the way to go. They agree with us that the government needs to take a stronger role in ensuring that the citizens of this country have access to high quality health care. I want to take you back down memory lane just a bit. You know, I've been thinking about President FDR as well. And in 1944, President FDR 15 years after the Great Depression. All of us know that he worked very hard on the New Deal. He wasn't by himself, but he had to be the leader to push this through. But even 15 years after the Great Depression, he talked about the Economic Bill of Rights in 1944. And in that Bill of Rights, he had a menu of options. It really reminds me very much of the People's Platform. But he said, this is what the citizens in this country, this is what Americans deserve. They deserve a job. They deserve decent wages. They deserve to be taken care of in their old age or during unemployment times, during the heaviest times of their lives. And they need health care. This was in 1944. And here we are in 2017, still fighting the same battle. It is a righteous battle. So I don't want you to get weary and well doing. We must organize. So we must protest and plan. This is the planning part that you're doing right there in Iowa. We must push and breathe, knowing that the darkness that we see is not a tomb, but it is a womb. It is the light that is going to come out. Rebirth is happening in this country, and we must not relent. And lastly, we must persevere. History is on our side. And I believe that with conscious-minded progressives all across this country, we will make Medicare for all happen. I know it and I believe it, but it cannot happen without you and your sisters and brothers all across this country. So don't you give up. We will push and breathe. We will protest and plan, and we will persevere. So thank you, Iowa, so much. It's such an honor and a pleasure to join you. And I hope to get there to see you before the year is over.
Exciting words and your motivating talk. This is exactly what I was looking for. And I think as we proceed today, we'll be looking in ourselves for, and from all of you, what on what sorts of steps you would like to see us take. Nina, thank you so much for that excellent.
Thank you. Pleasure joining you all.
So when you talk about the amount
Hi, everyone. Okay, can you hear me? Because it's a little difficult for me to hear you. But
Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you.
okay, great. Um,
Okay, yeah, you've been introduced. You can go ahead and start speaking.
oh, okay. Well, uh, I'm Anita Cameron, and I'm sorry, I'm just a little disconcerted because I can't see you, and part of that is because I have visual. I'm almost totally blind, but it's a little hard for me to hear you too. But okay, so I'll just go on uh, the fact um, that you all can hear me. So, all right. So I kind of well, I've been okay. So I'm Anita. I live in Rochester, New York. Um, I'm a member of ADAPT. I've been a member of ADAPT for 31 years. I started out in Chicago, Illinois. That was my first chapter. And then I moved to Colorado Springs and then Denver, Colorado, where I worked directly with Wade Blank, who's one of the founders. And I got to meet most of the original ADAPT folks, including the Gang of 19, who um, lay in the street for 2 days, uh, blocking buses to protest uh, the lack of wheelchair lifts on buses. And that was actually, although that occurred in 1978, that was what I call our shot heard round the world. And after that action, people began to contact us, people from around the country began contacting us, asking us, well, how can we do this? How do we do this? Of course, at the time in 1978, I was um, busy turning 13. So I was back home in Chicago, busy being a kid and not really, knowing about what happened. But I learned about ADAPT in 1986, and I joined and I did local actions from 1986 um, until 1988 when I joined, when I attended my first national action, which was in Washington, D.C. Actually, ADAPT got its start in 1983 in Denver. Uh, and so it was an honor for me to be able to uh, live in Denver and work with Wade and Blank and Molly and Larry Ruiz and some of the original folks. So ADAPT is obviously we're grassroots disability rights group. We have chapters in 23 states, and we have emerging chapters coming through, particularly um, in light of our summer of ADAPT, if you will. ADAPT is we are a nonviolent. Um, we do direct action. We do civil disobedience up to and including arrest. I've been arrested 131 times with ADAPT over 31 years, and fighting for the civil and human rights of people with disabilities. And so proud of each and every one. My last arrest was about a month ago, a little over a month ago in uh, Columbus, Ohio. Uh, some of us from Rochester joined the ADAPT folks to protest at Senator Rob Portman's office to get him to vote no on the Better Care Reconciliation Act. And he, obviously didn't meet with us. And so we were arrested and spent a little time in jail and, now we are looking at have to return to port um, in in Ohio. Uh, I'm sorry, that's my cat. I'm a cat lover, and he just, came right in front of me. Please excuse Nemo. And so, and so, I guess rather than me um, rattle and prattle on, maybe I can answer some questions, um, from folks about adapt and about how we organize and all that. Will that be okay?
Yeah.
We'll have to relay the questions back and forth probably, but that's great. Does anybody have any questions? I have a question, Anita. How, and because we're starting as a grassroots organization, how do people who have little money and little power put their energy behind something the way that ADAPT has so that we can get a movement, a real movement started here in Iowa around healthcare?
Great
I
question.
mean,
And many of us in ADAPT, and certainly when I started in ADAPT, the vast majority of us lived on SSI. Many of us still live on a fixed income. And so different chapters, fundraising, is a big part of it. Different chapters did, oh my goodness, I remember doing bake sales, um, selling t-shirts. In Chicago, we sold buttons. As a matter of fact, we had buttons made, and then we'd get permission from various malls and businesses, and we'd set up a little table, and with our buttons and with the jar, and generally the buttons were $1, but people gave donations, and we did that. We did that quite a lot. And as a matter of fact, I remember us having our own little button making machine, those cheapo button making machines that we, you know, I think that's part of the reason I have carpal tunnel is using that doggone button making machine. But I mean, for those of us who don't have money, that was kind of how we had to, to do it. Bake cookies and sell cookies and stuff. And then when we got a little more money, be able to order some T-shirts or different swag and sell that. Some of the Adapt chapters, um, for instance, the original Adapt chapter in Denver was actually our radical arm, if you will, of Atlanta's community. And so Adapt was the way that we did a lot of the direct in your face actions, while we, on the other hand, did our community organizing job. And so um, in Adapt, some of the chapters have affiliations with the local independent living center, and so that's the way that um, you know some of the financial support comes from. But from chapters that don't have that affiliation, it's all about the same kind of grassroots fundraising thing. When I was in Denver, and we would travel around the country, we didn't have the money to like fly all over the place via plane, so we convoyed. We those of us that had vans, lift equipped vans, or cars, or something like that, will convoy to different parts, of the state, or around the country, um, to be able to get to actions to support people, and all of that. So it's definitely definitely really grassroots, and you have to take into account people's ability, you know, to get to places, and what you can do when you don't, you know, due to disability or whatever, have the wherewithal to get to places. You know, so a lot of phone meetings, a lot of uh, petitions and calling people. You know, back in the day when ADAPT was started, we didn't have the internet, you know, or anything like that. And so a lot of our work was done by phone. When we did actions in order to get the word out, we would collect the newspaper articles, if there were any, and send them out. We use snail mail, you know, obviously, um, and you know, had to raise the funds for postage, you know, and all of that. These days, it's a little easier because even if you don't have a computer at home, I mean, most libraries have a computer and have a setup where if you need access to something, you know, they have that. And so lots of people can um, organized online, or via email or various groups. But you know, back in the day, it definitely was, you know, a lot, and that's what people do. And I see a lot of emerging chapters and stuff um, using like GoFundMe and other crowd sourcing applications to raise money. You know, a lot of people are doing it that way now and getting it out. It's a lot easier these days, you know, to do that because you have more options if you have access to the internet, or access, you know, obviously to a computer and to the internet. It's a lot easier. Or you access to some of these inexpensive conference call software on the phone. It's a lot easier these days when you don't have money, you know, or power to do it. But certainly back in the day, it was a whole lot harder.
Anita,
Yes.
this is Ruth. Thank you so much for joining us, and really driven home to me at least that there is absolutely no reason why we can't push this here in Iowa and start a groundswell across the country so that everybody will have access to health care. So thank you so much, and I'll be in touch with you.
Oh, thank you. It's my
Thank you.
pleasure.
All right. I guess at this point.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of other things.